And now I'd like to hand it over to our third keynote speaker for today, Robert van Westing, who is the Managing Director for Hundt Consult Netherlands. Robert, over to you.
Yes, good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining this this event with the Global PropTech. Thank you very much. Thanks for the introduction, Derek. As said, my name is Robert van Westing. I work for Hundt Consult, and Hundt Consult specializes in consultancy for lifts and escalators. We are the largest consultancy firm in this field within Europe. We're active within 3 countries and over 14 offices where we are present. So today I would like to take you down the road of, for me, very familiar terrain, where lifts are what I breathe day in, day out, but I'd like you to take along a path from very far back history up to today and how it has impacted us with this Corona crisis that we are experiencing. Let me try and share my screen. There we go. Good. If all is well, you can see the main screen now. Lifts. Generally regarded as the most safe, efficient, and comfortable means to transport within buildings. Lifts have shown to be a potential risk due to Corona, and it has really throughout this year, undermined this belief that this piece of very important technology has become a risk for us. We largely depend on this piece of technology, and we have really become very used to them. And without a proper and safe way to move in and around buildings, a lot of things will happen, not very positive, because we are so dependent on this. And how has this happened? How has the threat of Corona affected lifts? And that's the journey I'd like to take you with me on the next half hour or so. But as I was preparing for this presentation, I was thinking about the trends for 2021, and I'm pretty sure that you also, and that's probably the reason why you are joining us today, you also are considering 2021. What do I like to do? Do you maybe foresee growth or further contraction, if there was any, in 2020? Are there certain sectors or customers that you'd like to do more business with, or maybe some that you'd like to see less of? So essentially, I also asked myself the question, what do I need into 2021 to be able to succeed? Well, in obvious terms, to look forward is also very good to look backwards. And that, as a famous person once said, is very necessary. Winston Churchill said that, actually. He said, the further backwards you can look, the further forward you can see. And if you then think about 2020, it's not a very rosy picture that we are presented with. Many events have happened that have impacted us in work, in business, professionally, but also very likely in personal life. And in most cases, this has been negative. Of course, there's also been upsides. People have seen more opportunities. Online business is in part thriving. But generally 2020, the rearview mirror of 2020, global warming, it continues to come at us from all directions on a daily basis, nearly an hourly basis. You can see reports on how it is worsening day by day. And sorry, that's not, there we go. How it is worsening day by day. It seems that every year seems to be even warmer than the previous. And you can see all sorts of reports from the Arctic to permafrost areas in the north, that have already since many years been thawing, and in doing so, releasing methane gas, which even increases global warming further. So it's hard to get a break. In the political sphere, you see large differences of opinion, and science is largely in agreement, and this makes us very insecure, and that really, at least for me, resembled 2020. And on top of that, last week I read the first report about journalists that are slowly finding out that that companies like Shell actually investigated this phenomenon 30 to 40 years ago, and actually more or less see themselves proven right now. So not great. At the same time, we saw this year massive wildfires in Australia, an area almost the size of Great Britain burned down in Australia alone. Unprecedented. It's called the Black Summer, and certainly it was. Many people died, over 30. Billions of animals were affected. Koalas, there was also a report on it last week by WWF, and they're now a step closer to being on the endangered species list. California also saw, again, a lot of wildfires. This is also one of those themes that keeps recurring, if not that it's just a constant. This year alone, 4% of the total volume of California was burned, about 100 million acres that California has. 4% of it, just this year alone, makes it again the biggest in recorded history. We can top that though. There was an economic crisis with a size that we haven't seen before. Yeah, we have about 90 years ago during the Great Depression, and that is exactly what happened. Many countries have seen extreme contractions. Stock markets crashed with a recession, and in some countries, depressions as a result. Unemployment rose sharply, and the contraction was all over the place. It was very difficult. A lot of countries reacted rapidly, implementing various programs to limit this crisis immediately for the small and medium-sized companies, but also with the hope that the long term will not be tedious and it will not be a slump for a very continued time frame. And if that was not enough, 2020 threw at us civil unrest, Black Lives Matters, police violence, systemic racism, name it, and it was there. There were many, many countries affected. It was widespread and it was devastating. Looting, property destruction, violence, confrontations. 2020 wasn't great. And this may sound as a bit of a strange introduction, but this is really my reflection of the 2020, and I'm pretty sure that many people will also summarize 2020 in these great groups. So there are a lot of things in 2020 that we would rather see less of. It reminded us that we cannot take things for granted. We would like to have economic stability or development. We would like to be employed, live in a safe country, and breathe clean air that is not polluted. And then December 2019 saw what was likely the biggest event of 2020. Like I said, a lot of things cannot be taken for granted. And it turned out we were ambushed by air. That sounds maybe silly, and I'm not trying to downplay this virus. By all means, to date, we lost over 1.5 million people. And that is even with the strict measures that were put in place. And then you're willing to forget the rising temperatures. You're willing to forget unemployment, wildfires. This has stopped everything. Corona took center stage and has really, really been destructive in various ways. Yeah. What is it then that I'm aiming at? Well, it is really the air. What I've also seen during 2020 is an increased awareness that clean air should be a given. Clean air is something that we should all be able to rely on. And it really supports the approach towards Corona or a Corona-free society. It certainly is not the main part. It is not foremost present, as we all know. That is a possible vaccine, but it certainly will help. But not only with Corona, also in general, and I'll expand a little bit on that in the next slides. Of course, it leaves the question, Corona and lift cabins. Why do they have such a difficult relationship? Well, results from recent studies have shown that. I'm pretty sure many of you were already familiar or have already read up on how Corona is transmitted, various ways. But as those reports have shown, poorly ventilated spaces allow aerosols to drift freely in the air. And if you look on the right of your screen with the Slieren image, it is made quite, in a way, it's beautiful to see this, but also very remarkable that just breathing in and out air, as I do and as we all do now, has such an impact, has such a big range that beforehand we couldn't have guessed. I'm sure scientists would disagree with me on that, but it just made it very visible for me. And looking at that picture, it also looks there's some air coming from his head, but that's beside the point. Like I said, aerosols and the pattern of breathing have shown that ventilation has become very important. Possibly you've seen even worse images of live people sneezing or coughing, where speed is greater, and so the range of the air exhaled is a lot bigger. But it all boiled down to the fact that ventilation was a logical next step to be taken. In fact, the report from the University of Amsterdam showed that in closed cabins, aerosols can maintain afloat for 20 and with closed doors up to 30 minutes in a lift cabin. And this is where I say that air quality must be a given. Well, if we're then talking about ventilation, if we're then aware that social distancing is relevant, then I'm pretty sure that we're all familiar with a scene like this. We've seen many empty offices. It was mandatory to work from home. I think there were quite a number of upsides, but largely there were also a lot of downsides. We ended up with empty offices. We ended up working from home, where working from home was not possible or where it was not desirable. We've become familiar with these safety measure sheets that you can find in any shape and form in offices around, well, in my instance, in the Netherlands. You wear face masks internally, and outside you keep still distance and you clean your hands. And then the next thing is, how do you move freely around an office? Because most likely it has multiple floors, and that's where the lift comes into play. It was no longer possible to move freely around the office. It had a particular entry point and it has a different exit point. There were certain paths that you could follow. A cafeteria, a canteen, if it was opened, if it was allowed to open, had essentially not been a place where social gatherings could take place, where you could exchange thoughts. They were turned into drive-thrus. And those, of course, are not how lunch breaks should be spent. it's a strange way to think about your canteen as a drive-through, but certainly you recognize that when the building has a lift and that you can see that the capacity has been reduced to 10% or maybe 20% of its original design, that this will have a significant impact. But before we go further into that, let's jump back many, many centuries. It will be good to understand a little bit better our dependency on lifts, because even before Christ walked the earth, references have been found about lifting platforms. Now, in that era, it was people or animals that were helping lifting up these platforms. And over centuries, the need for these have increased. In the 17th century, a screwdriver was invented. And then when the industrial area entered, people were actively developing and researching possible means to lift items, goods, and people with greater speed over greater distances and greater loads. And eventually in 1852, Elisha Otis, he invented a crucial safety feature. And that really, with that, the modern lift was born. Now Rome, as you can see on the left side of the screen, in a way is linked to this development that has been realized over centuries. It was regarded as the first metropolis, and at that point it was called Urbs Romana. I'm pretty sure I'm not pronouncing it properly, but as it was called back then, Urbs Romana, it attracted people from all over the earth. It was the center of the world. Money, power, safety, prosperity, it could all be found there. And if you consider that, then it makes sense that all roads lead to Rome. The Roman Empire, they were well known for their engineering genius, and they made a lot of things possible. And so everybody wanting to go to Rome could go to Rome. All roads lead to Rome. And then it is no surprise to recognize and realize that urbanization actually finds its origin in this word, Urbs Romana. And so urbanization has been around for a long, long time, and nowadays it's a common word that we use. However, in the state that we live in now, it has really expanded and sped up with greater speed than ever. Technology has gone hand in hand and evolved, and also lifts have made great strides to support this development. Some of you may know that there are actually double-deck lifts. Dazzling speeds are now realized. Until a few years ago, the limit of a skyscraper was down to the cables of lifts being too heavy if the travel distance was too high. Also, that has been overcome with carbon fiber cables. Then take into consideration limited space, but also pride, power, and money, and skyscrapers are a logical result of this urbanization trend. It has set the tone for many skylines. And on the right of the screen, most of you have probably recognized Hong Kong. But what you probably do not know is that Hong Kong, to date, has 480 buildings, skyscrapers that are larger than 150 meters. Great strides have been made to allow urbanization to just steamroll ahead. But that is not all. I'll give you a further sense of this dependency that we have on elevators, because skyscrapers are not the biggest driver. They are eye catchers, certainly. Now on the left side of the screen, you see an insight into a plan that was drawn up probably in 2016, so very much pre-corona. But you can see that the trajectory was back then already very good. The building, modernization, service industry, all for lifts, have seen and will see again, driven by this urbanization, growth. Consider then also that, for example, China has probably close to about 5 million lifts. The United States, well over 1 million lifts. Europe, it's reported to have over 6 million lifts. Our dependency on vertical transportation is immense, and we need to take that into consideration if we think about the corona crisis. It's all part of this urbanization. And in Europe alone, the Lift Association estimates that 1 billion users take the lift on a daily basis. With a pinch of salt, you could also say that, or not the, you couldn't say that, but the main manufacturers claim that they safely transport on a daily basis globally 1 billion people per day. Now, of course, pinch of salt, because this marketing number 1 billion is of course very attractive, and I'm not quite sure if those manufacturers, 5 of them, all do that, but I think it is quite clear that we are very dependent on lifts and how they have been pivotal in our expansion and drive for further urbanization. Okay, then let's zoom back into the here and now and how Corona has affected us, how it has impacted our daily lives, our routines and surroundings, how it has limited us. Now, the methods, the measures that have been implemented so far, they have been quick fixes. Certainly, a vaccine will help a lot, and I'm by no means a medical expert, so I will not try and value that effort or the outcome of it. But you also hear a lot of hesitation. Who's going to get the vaccine first? Is everybody going to get vaccinated? And if, then how long will immunity last? And what about, again, this increased awareness of clean air? What are long-term solutions to create a new normal? Well, long-term solutions. Obviously, a vaccine will be part of that. But I've decided to look at the 4 methods that are known today. You can see them in the screen. Possibly there are more. Very likely it will be a mix of many measures, but I'm concentrating to the 4 most recognized methods that could be applied. And some even we don't know at this very day. It may surprise you, but developers and architects, since the pandemic, they have considered and are considering and debating on designing new buildings with significantly more lifts to allow increased capacity again. So for our approach now today, let's focus on these 4. They are known. They're also where most questions are from owners and users. So let's start with the left sort of column, using stairs. And actually using stairs is one thing, but reducing capacity, they more or less fall into the same category. They certainly have the same results. But to start with stairs, it will likely not surprise you to say that this will not be the general solution that will be applied across the board. Surely stairs will be important. It can certainly help in low or medium-sized buildings for people that are able to take the stairs. But generally, people take the lift when more than 2 flights of stairs are to be taken. So there's a bit of a culture change required. Even if people are willing and able, even if it is enforced, many buildings will not allow for this. It's practically not possible. Modern buildings, stairways, much like lifts, have a certain capacity. In fact, modern buildings, their evacuation routes largely depend on a combination of using stairs and elevators. And so you can really take this first left column as its current circumstances and deem it that using either the stairs or reducing the capacity of the lift will lead to a depreciation of the building. The building was designed in a different manner, and using either of these two methods will not let the building perform as it was designed, and thus it will lead to depreciation. So what else then is there? Well, ventilation. It was already mentioned there in the reports, and the ventilation is a big thing. It was an often asked question, is my lift cabin ventilated? And I think we all have become a little bit experts on ventilation. Opening of doors in the lift has been also very often asked question. Well, ventilation we can split up in two groups for the lifts. The common lift that you can find in your apartment building, and also the more luxurious type lifts in offices or in hotels. The first group generally does not have active ventilation. There is enough fresh air in the lift cabin, but as the report from the University of Amsterdam showed, aerosols can stay afloat for 20 to even 30 minutes. The second group has active ventilation in lift cabins, but the lift shaft does not have an active ventilation system. And so air is merely put back into the lift cabin, into the lift shaft, and thereby reduced actively. There was no vent in the lift shaft that actively spits out old air and new air comes in. Again, there is enough air, but when aerosols are present, it is likely they will stay afloat. And so the filtering and cleaning of air is where a lot of attention has been put. Improving air quality has become a viable and a very popular solution. Across the sector within lifts, this is now seen as a very good solution. It already existed, the technique, and it's thus is very simple and safe and a quick solution. Before we look at the techniques available, it will be good to look at how we can actually improve air quality. So here are a list of the main pathogens that those type of air purifiers are trying to get rid of. Of course, corona is the elephant in the room, but there are also many other harmful viruses. If you look at influenza, just take a look at the Netherlands, and I'm pretty sure many other countries as well. Annually, influenza or flu shots are made available to people with increased risk or that are working in the medical field. But also other items as VOCs and dust are matters that we would like to get rid of to increase air quality. Well, these are then the most frequently used techniques available within the medical market. These are, not all. It's not an extensive list of all possible methods, but these are most commonly used and recognized standardized methods. However, quite a number of them do not really apply. If we look at oxidation or the ultraviolet lighting, those are methods that cannot be used when people are present. And so this already makes the list a lot smaller. Harmful byproducts cannot be used within a lift cabin. I'm pretty sure everybody understands. Then if we look at filtering techniques, also very well developed, recognized. Probably most known is the HEPA filter that is widely used in airliners, and recently also in Tesla models, the most upscale, I should say. But filters also have a downturn. Effectively, they collect all the pathogens that are there, and if not maintained very well, they could be a breeding ground for viruses. So if we then consider filtering, it should also be recognized how this plays into the aspect of a lift. The operating environment and the manufacturers that are looking after these lifts, these are technicians that mostly would come from the automobile industry, trained technicians that are trained in-house by lift companies themselves. After all, there is no such thing as a profession for lift technicians. So to align those with medical applications and maintenance in a manner that is required in the medical field, it is very difficult. So my conclusion of what is available within the market is that to allow a method that creates clean air while having low maintenance requirements, operating costs, and does not pose a risk of filter contamination, we automatically come to what is commonly known as a plasma air purifier. Now, this is where hopefully I've kept your attention for a long time, but this is where I come into the bit more commercial part of this presentation. The product that you see on the screen is a plasma filter. It's called a plasma filter commonly, but it should actually be called a plasma air purifier. Disinfecting air 24/7. This is a product that Hundt Consult has developed together with Noveris. And how it works is very simple. You can see the product has a fan, a very powerful fan. It pulls in the air that is present within the lift cabin. This unit hangs on the wall of a lift cabin, and it pulls in the air depending on the volume of the lift cabin. Of course, you recognize that lift cabins come in all sizes and shapes, and depending on the size of the cabin, we would be able to supply a small or a bigger size unit that pulls in this air. The air is then drawn over a low energy plasma coil. Now, this plasma coil deactivates all the pathogens that are within this air. It does that on DNA level. It does that within a fraction of a second, 0.02 seconds in fact. And all the contaminations, smells, odors, viruses that you could have seen a few sheets back, they are destroyed down to the DNA level. And so this method, this ionizer, this purifier, this is the low maintenance, this is the 24/7, tirelessly and very effective method to reduce the risk of any virus or contamination. This, in large part, ends my presentation. I have another slide to show on what Hundt Consult can do for you in the 3 countries where we are present. But for now, I would take some questions if there are any.
Hi, Robert. Thank you for that.